Hey folks, let's get started with this paired passage. Now this is a relatively simple paired passage, and here we are comparing two ideas. Now remember, in paired passages, the most important thing is you want to find out what's the thesis for each of the passage, and you want to find out if one of the passage is supporting the other. Usually the second will support the first one, or many of the cases, the second one is going to be opposing the first one. Okay, and in this case, we're going to see the second passage is going to be opposing the first one. So let's get started. Remember, the first thing you got to do is you got to read this introduction. Very, very important to read this. Okay, so let's get started. Passage one is adapted from this person's Stuart Brand's The Case for Reviving Extinct Species. So the case means the reason or the benefits of reviving extinct species. Okay, so we don't know what this exactly means as of now, but it's something talking something about species, some animals or plants being extinct, and then you're reviving them, kind of like almost bringing them back from the dead. All right. Now, the second passage is from Scientific American. Why the efforts to bring extinct species back from the dead miss the point. Okay, this is a fairly negative one, right? It's going against this first one. Remember, the first one is saying that we gotta revive the extinct species, and this guy is saying if you bring them back, right, it's really misses the point. And also note the year of publication is very similar. So this is most probably a response to this first one. Okay, so let's get started. Remember, reading the passage, you wanna read this passage such that you want to first break it down, this passage number one, into two parts. So why don't we just cut it over here. Okay, this place over here, we're gonna cut it, and we're just gonna read this real quick. So many extinct species, from the passenger pigeon to woolly mammoth, might now be reclassified as bodily but not genetically extinct. Okay, so they're extinct in some way. What is bodily genetically? We'll talk about it now. So they're dead, but their DNA is recoverable from the museum species. Okay, even those as 200,000 years ago. So even though the animals are dead, right, the bodies are not there, but their species are stored in some place, right? And then you can do some science experiments, and then you can find the DNA strands, etc., and then actually recreate the animal somehow. Okay. Now, thanks to new developments in this technology, the DNA may eventually bring the animals to life. Only species whose DNA is too old to be recovered, such as dinosaurs, right, are the ones that are considered totally extinct bodily, right? Bodily, of course, even these guys are extinct bodily, but not genetically. These guys are not genetically extinct, while these are genetically extinct, because clearly the dinosaur DNA is it's too corrupted, even in the museums, to bring them back. Okay, but why should we bring creatures to life? So that's the most important question. It could be expensive and difficult, right? And it may take a long time. It'll take decades, and it won't ever succeed. So why even try? So that's the first part here. Remember, the first part is always he's just trying to make something interesting happen, right? From the author's point of view, he's trying to make things interesting. So yes, you can get animals back from the dead, but why? And that question is over here. Why do we take enormous trouble to protect endangered species? Right? The same reasons will apply. So what are the reasons to preserve biodiversity? Okay, to restore diminished ecosystems, etc., right? And to undo harm that humans might have caused in the past. So there's this section of species who are almost dying, and then these species have totally died, right? So he's saying if we can revive this, maybe we can use this idea for these guys as well, etc. Right? So less harm will be done. Furthermore, the prospect of de-extinction, nice word, de-extinction, right? Reviving people from the dead, or at least species from extinction, is profound news. Why is that? Okay, why is it? Something is as irreversible and final as extinction might be reversed is a stunning realization. For sure, it's almost like getting, right, like bringing somebody back from the dead, right? The imagination soars, right? It's amazing. Wow, it's exciting. It's almost like a movie here. Just the thought of mammoths and passenger pigeons alive again invokes the awe and wonder that drives all conservation at its deepest level. So conservation is the environmental conservation, right? So it makes it, right, it makes us excited, and then it totally changes. This means it totally changes the perspective of how you can do environmental conservation, right? You really don't need to do anymore. It's kind of like you an accident, right? You're not worried about an accident anymore because you know even if you're almost dead, somebody can bring you back, right? In the future, maybe like 500 years from now. Okay, now that's the first passage. It's pro. It's pro this kind of a de-extinction idea. Now the second one, the idea of bringing back extinct species holds obvious GWAS appeal and a respite from steady stream of grim news, right? So what is this saying? Okay, it's exciting. So this is immediately following this idea, right? This is written by somebody else and actually opposing it, but they just want to take this idea. Oh yeah, it sounds very cool, but this is a very very important word. Okay, this kind of a word is very important. Yet, however, those are very important words. Yet, with limited intellectual bandwidth and financial resources, de-extinction threatens to divert attention from modern biodiversity crisis, right? From here, so there's this important crisis that's going on where animals are actually alive, and instead of looking at those, you want to spend money on something that's already dead and you want to bring them alive. Okay, according to this report, some 20,000 species are currently in grave danger of going extinct. So so many animals are here. There's 20,000 of them who are in danger of going extinct. But this earlier author is focused on the things that are already gone. Okay, so that's what this person is saying. Species today are vanishing in such great numbers, many from hunting and habitat. That's all human, right? Human based, right? Some of them can be climate based, which has out of human control. Most of them are human, right? That the trend has been called the sixth mass extinction. So apparently there were five, I don't know, an event on par with such die-offs, such as the one that befell the dinosaurs so many years ago. Okay, a program to restore extinct species poses a risk of selling the public on a false promise that technology alone can solve our ongoing environmental woes. So the technology, right? It's something like saying, hey, you can eat as much as you want, you can gain as much weight, you can have all kinds of heart trouble, but there's this technology that can save you. So it's kind of a band-aid is what this person is saying, right? An implicit assurance that even if a species goes away, we can snap our fingers and bring it back, right? Almost like a new technology, right? Okay, already conservationists face difficult choices about which species and ecosystems to try to save because there are so many that are breaking down. Right? Which one should I save? Should I save this one, or this one? Right? Because they cannot rescue them all. Why? Because there's not enough time or money to do this. Many countries where poaching and trade in threatened species are rampant either do not want to give up the revenue because it makes money for them, right? Or lack the wherewithal or the energy or the resources to enforce their own regulations. Okay, so these countries are not able to do this. Against that backdrop, a costly and flamboyant project to resuscitate extinct flora and fauna in the name of conservation looks irresponsible. So there's already trouble here, and you're going to come in and say, hey, that doesn't matter. Even if they're dead, right, we can resuscitate them, right? So that sounds irresponsible. So the good word is irresponsible, okay? So that's what he's saying. It's irresponsible. That's the whole idea over here. This idea is great. It's cool, but it's irresponsible. Should we resurrect the mammoth only to let elephants go under? So this is kind of like part for a whole. This one is, should we resurrect the extinct species, right, and let the almost endangered species go away, right, go under, right? Of course not, right? That's his answer. That is not to say that this enterprise lacks merit. Means, yeah, it's definitely this is like a roundabout, a double no kind of, right? It's just saying that, yeah, it could be useful. And how could it be useful? In the following ways. Remember, every paragraph here, right, the important part is the first sentence and the last sentence. Even if you understand that completely, right, you got a good, you got the gist of it, right? You got the whole idea. Aspects of it could conceivably help save endangered species. Aspects of what? Of this idea that this person is suggesting, right? Bringing things back from the dead. How? For example, extinct versions of genes could be reintroduced into species. Now, this is important because this is the ending of the passage, right? This is where the questions begin. So you got to be super careful you understand this. Remember, you got to read it only once. Don't read it and then go back and read it and then go back. Okay, read it once with so much confidence. Okay, aspects of it could conceivably help save endangered species. How? For example, extinct versions of genes could be introduced into species and subspecies that have lost a dangerous amount of genetic diversity. So this is a long sentence, right? What this is saying is there are some animals, right? Very few of them are left, and their genes are very similar. The same animal, right? Let's say there are only 4 humans left, right? And they are kind of like, this is the maternal uncle of this guy, this is the cousin of this, and this guy is the mother of this. Very similar gene pool has remained, right? Not many animals remain. Not many animals from a particular species remain. There are certain species which, such as the black-footed ferret and the northern white rhino. So these two animals are given as examples of such a small, such a endangered species or a gene pool where very few animals are remaining from that species, and they have very similar genes. And remember, as you know, if the genes are similar, right, then the next generation is probably gonna get extinct, right? They might have some genetic deficiencies. So such investigations, however, should be conducted under the mantle of preserving modern biodiversity. So that should be the goal. This is what it's saying. The goal should be, right, the central idea should be to preserve biodiversity, not to bring the extinct species, because this is irresponsible. It takes a lot of money, time, etc. Okay, so now let's look at the answers. Remember, your passage should be annotated like this. It should look messy like this. You need to understand what is going on, right? Once you understand this, the answers are going to be super easy. Okay, answering the questions is going to be so easy. So the author of passage 1 suggests that the usefulness of this technology may be limited by what? Okay, so by what is it limited? The amount of time they are able to devote? No, that's not true. Relationship of an extinct species to the, never talked about this. Complexity of the DNA, maybe something sounds similar. And length of the time that a species has been extinct, yes, this is the one. Because remember, the dinosaurs have been extinct for 65 million years. And you can resuscitate, you can bring back from the dead the things that are only 200k years, not 65 million, because their DNA is there in the fossils, but it's totally corrupted, that we don't have that much technology. We have the technology to bring these things back. Okay, so that's why D is your correct answer. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Okay, 7 to 9, 9 to 11, 13. Okay, so let's look at 7 to 9. Here it is. Thanks to the new development in genetic technology, the DNA may bring the animals back to life. So that's out, right? That's not the one. Remember, what you want to show is the best evidence for the answer to the previous question, which is it takes a long time. Right? If it's, if it takes a long time, if it's too far out in the past, right, you wouldn't be able to get them. Okay, now the next one is 9 to 11. So only species whose DNA is too old to be recovered, right, or can be considered totally extinct bodily and genetically. So that's exactly what they're talking about. The DNA is too old to be recovered. And you see, I've already marked it, right? When you get into the habit of marking stuff, you'll automatically be marking the correct answers anyway. Okay. So that's why 9 is a very big maybe. Okay, very big maybe. So I'm just going to mark it like this. Okay, line 13 and 13 to 14. Okay, so what's 13 talking about? But why bring vanished creatures to life? So that's not right. It would be expensive and difficult, etc. It'll take decades. This is talking about time, but not the time that we want, right? It's just talking about the future, how long it'll take. So it won't succeed. So both of these, 13 and 14, are wrong. Remember, you need to use the process of elimination. It's very important for you to understand and get the highest score this way. Okay, as used in line 27, deepest, most, nearly means. Let's go to line 27. And remember, the way you solve this is you need to, even without looking at the answers, you need to understand what's going on. So let's see what this is talking about. Remember, this passage is like, this is super cool, right? It's profound news. The imagination soars, which means it's super exciting. Just the thought of mammoths and passenger pigeons alive, again, invokes the wonder that drives all conservation at its deepest level. So at its deepest level means it's gonna drive, means it's gonna lead it. It's gonna make things happen, right? People are gonna be so excited about this that it's totally gonna change the idea of how to conserve the environment, how to save the environment, what to do with nature, right? And how humans will interact with nature. So this means it's very at its very basic level, right? Things will change altogether. Okay, now let's see the answers. Engrossing, no. Challenging, No. Extensive? Maybe, but fundamental sounds the most correct because it's fundamentally the whole idea is going to change, right? It's like moving from arithmetic to algebra, right? You totally fundamentally have to change your thinking, or from algebra to calculus, right? You have to fundamentally change the way you think about math. It's the same way the conservation is going to change its approach when we have this new technology. Okay, the authors of passage 2 indicate that the matter of shrinking biodiversity should primarily be considered a, now they haven't given any number, any references, so let's think about it. A historical anomaly. They did talk about historical, it's the sixth extinction, right? But it's not an anomaly of any sort, right? The matter of shrinking biodiversity, a small maybe, but let's look at the other ones. A global catastrophe, yes. Yes, very big maybe, right? This biodiversity, it's like a die-off. It's what they're saying over here, right? Somewhere over here, I remember they said um, it's a die-off, right? It's a mass extinction, so it's a big deal. Okay, a scientific curiosity, shrinking biodiversity is a scientific curiosity, but these guys haven't mentioned it. Okay, so that's why this is out. A political problem, for sure, it is a political problem right now and forever, right? But that's never mentioned. So that's why this is gone. And out of these two, B is your answer. All right, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So let's look at 37 to 41. So 37 is right over here. Species today are vanishing in such great numbers, many from hunting and habitat, that the trend has been called a sixth mass extinction, right? So that does sound like it. Okay, so that's what we were talking about. Just intuitively, we could figure it out. So this is a very big maybe. 42 to 45, you can check. That's probably not going to be right. So 40 to 45 is right over here. A program to restore extinct species. So this is some false promise stuff, right? So that's incorrect. So this is gone. 53 to 56. Against that backdrop, a costly, so it's talking about the flamboyant project, right? So that's why this one as well is going to be incorrect. And then you can check even this guy's going to be correct. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. As used in line 37, great most nearly means. Remember, you don't need to look at this first. You need to go back to line 37. Okay, so where's line 37? Right over here. Species today are vanishing in such great numbers, which means in huge numbers, right? And so let's look at it. Great, lofty. This is the primary meaning. That's out. Wonderful is out. Our great most nearly means large, very very big maybe, and then intense, no. Okay, so that's why C is your correct answer. Okay, so now let's move on to 44. The reference to black-footed ferret and the northern white rhino in line 64 serves mainly to, let's look at this. 64 is right over here. Oh yes, it's the black-footed ferret and the northern white rhino. So what's this about? Remember they're talking about these examples, such as, right? So remember we were talking about these four human beings. They have very similar genetic conditions, right? So the extinct version of genes could be reintroduced into species and subspecies that have lost a dangerous amount of genetic diversity, right? Genetic diversity. So let's look at the answers now. It serves mainly to emphasize a key distinction between extinct and living species. Sounds very tempting, right? Let's just mark it as a maybe. Account for types of animals whose numbers are dwindling. Not really. Their numbers are dwindling, but that's not what it's serving mainly to do. They're mostly serving to tell us that these animals, they exist, but their gene pool is very less, and you should pump in this technology to make their genes more diverse. Okay, so this is true, but that's not the main purpose, and that's why this also I will cancel right now. Now that I think about it, this is also not a maybe. Okay, provide examples of species whose gene pools are compromised. Totally, that's exactly what it is. Their genes are compromised, means genes are very few genes are remaining now in their subspecies or species, right? And you got to inject more species. That's the whole idea. Highlight the instances of animals that have failed to adapt. This is totally incorrect. Okay, so that's why C is the correct answer. Now let's look at 45. Which choice best states the relationship between two passages? Remember, this is a great question. I think you know this. This first passage is giving a thesis, and the second one is opposing it, right? So passage 2 attacks a political decision that passage 1 strongly advocates. No, there's nothing about politics here, even though climate change and environmental conservation is a political issue, but not here, not in these two passages. Passage 2 urges caution regarding a technology that passage 1 describes in favorable terms. Describes in favorable terms and urges caution for sure. So this is a very big maybe. Okay, passage 2 expands on the results of a research. It does not expand. Okay, it goes against it, so that's gone. And passage 2 considers practical applications that could arise from a theory discussed in passage 1. Is that the most important thing? It does mention some of the practical applications, but mostly it's the purpose of writing it, right? Remember the ending of the passage, it does mention something about those ferrets and right, rhinos, but that's not the main thing. Okay, so be careful. This could be a very big a possible answer, but that's not the correct one. That's why B is the correct answer. Okay, we've got remaining last two questions remaining. How would the authors of passage 2, second passage, most likely respond to the prospect referred to in line 21? What's the prospect? Okay, what is the meaning of this prospect word? Okay, let's look at it. 21 over here is furthermore, the prospect of de-extinction is profound news, right? Remember, this whole passage was like, wow, this is so cool. That's what this ending of the passage 1 is trying to tell us. Something as irreversible and extinction might be irreversible, and final as extinction might be reversed is awesome. It's so cool, right? And that's what he's saying. This is so amazing. And then let's see what the passage 2 guys have to say about this. Okay, so let's see what passage 2 guys have to say about this. We're here. Okay, so how would the authors of passage 2 say? Remember, all of this prospect and this cool stuff is being said by the passage 1 guys. What do the passage 2 guys say about it? What have to say about this prospect, right? This awesomeness. Okay, with approval. So how would they respond to it? With approval, would they respond to it? For sure not, right? Because they're not approving anything, right? They're not saying this is good. Okay, with resignation, because a gradual extinction is inevitable. Resignation means they gave up, right? They're not fighting. They're opposing this idea. So that's out. With concern, very big maybe, right? Because it implies an easy solution to a difficult problem. So remember, it's already a difficult problem, right? There's so many things affecting the biodiversity, right? And then these people are saying, hey, why don't we just have a technology that, right, gets that makes them alive? But what about these various situations here, right? Maybe these other these factors that affect the destruction of these species, maybe they can go back and they can affect some other things on Earth, right? So that's why it's said it's an easy solution to a difficult problem, right? So that's never a good idea. Okay, and with disdain, because it shows that people have little understanding of the importance of genetic diversity. They never said that. Okay, so this is out, and then there's no disdain, and usually there isn't unless it's like an 1800s passage. Okay, very understated passages these are. Okay, so C is the correct answer. Let's look at the last question here. Which choice would best support the claim that the authors of passage 2 recognize that the imagination source? Okay, line 24, passage 1. Let's look at what this imagination source business is over here. Okay, so line right over here, the imagination source. Again, the same thing. Remember this passage, guys, and I know it's a mess over here, so thanks for your patience with this. This is talking about how cool this technology is, the imagination source. It makes you excited about this technology, right? Just the thoughts of other things being alive that you never saw. Yeah, it's cool, but do we have the time and money right now to do it and get distracted from the important crisis at hand, which is biodiversity and extinction of more animals to come, right? So how would the authors recognize this particular piece? Okay, how do they recognize it? So let's see, do they recognize it in the first place? So remember, it's recognize it, not oppose it. Okay, it's just recognizing it. Okay, this de-extinction technology. So lines 28 to 30. Right over here, the idea of bringing back extinct species holds obvious Jeeves appeal, right? And a respite from steady stream of grim news. So they are recognizing it, right? They're saying this is very cool. That's how they started, and this is how a passage usually starts. Whenever there's a passage, guys, which is opposing another passage, at the start it's going to say, yeah, this is cool. I know this is you guys are not doing a bad job, but something more is at hand, right? So that's how the introduction is like, okay, I recognize it. I recognize it's very cool. And that's what this word over here means, right? I recognize it's very cool, but and this was the yet that we talked about earlier, right? But there are more important things at hand. Okay, so this is a very big maybe. They recognize it. Remember, they're asking, not opposing it. How do they recognize this thing that the first author says? Yes, they're also saying it's indeed cool. That's a very big maybe. 30 to 33. Okay, yet with limited intellectual bandwidth and financial resources go right, de-extinction threatens. So this, they're opposing it now, right? At the start they're saying, oh yeah, it's cool, right? This way they're recognizing it, but something happens. So that's why this is incorrect. That's why this one is incorrect here. Okay, now 58 to 59, 58 to 59 is going to be over here, right? That is not to say the de-extinction enterprise lacks merit altogether. So okay, so now they're coming back over here, right? They're saying it is very cool. Yes, it is. It's an important one, but they're not saying the imagination source, right? They're not saying the imagination source. Okay, so that's why this is the incorrect one. This is the incorrect one here. And then 61 to 63 as well. 61 to 63 as well over here is going to be, for example, extinct versions of genes could be introduced into species, right? So yeah, they want to use this idea, but are they saying it's the imagination source or it's, oh my goodness, it's awesome? No, they're saying they're being very understated. The only time they're being super excited about this is the starting part over here, the obvious G is uphill, right? So that's the only time, and that's the reason why A is correct and D is out. Okay, remember these are possible choices, right? But this one is very strong, and that's why A is the correct answer. Okay, so once again, remember these paired passages. You need to understand what each of these are saying. Many times there will be the second one will be will be supporting the first one, but I would say many times in the SAT sections, the second one opposes this first one, and the dates are also very similar. Okay, so with that, we'll close this video. Watch out for the next video on reading, and talk to you very soon. Bye.